One of the most powerful diagnostic tools farmers have is tissue sampling. Pulling samples on a regular basis allows you to stay ahead of potential issues that have yet to visually reveal themselves, and gives you the opportunity to take corrective action in a timely manner.
My thoughts on tissue testing are, why am I tissue testing? Did I visually see a deficiency that I want to go and pull a tissue test and make sure I identify it correctly before I go try and address it? Or am I tissue testing to get ahead of a possible deficiency of some kind and make sure I don't miss anything throughout the season? Another reason to tissue test might be to build a data set. It might be going out multiple times throughout a season or multiple seasons and pulling tissue tests to build a set of data that you can use to address fertility issues in the future.
So if we're going to do something like a long-term set, we're going to want to look at different things such as the timing of when you're doing it, the crop stage of when the sample is being pulled. You want to look at environmental factors. If you're in a drought year, you have to make sure you take that into effect because your next year may be a wet year. These are things that you have to look at over the long term whenever you're doing your averages. So a very important factor when pulling these tissue tests is going to be consistency of acquiring your samples. So things that we have to consider are going to be environmental factors and cultural practices that we use. Environmental factors are going to be anything from time of day, are we doing it early in the morning or in the evening? It's important to be consistent whenever we're pulling those, that we're staying in that same time frame. Another thing is going to be the weather. If we can, we don't want to go out one day whenever the sun is just blazing and take one compared to the next day that it's overcast and cloudy. We want to make sure that we're trying to, as best as we can, make the environmental factors as close as possible, because remember, we are comparing these samples to try to get a data set the rest of that crop's growing cycle.
It's important to understand when tissue testing that a tissue test is simply a snapshot in that crop's life. It's what's happening on that particular day at that moment when you pull that test. So if you've been just through a couple of days of high heat and drought, and maybe that plant couldn't pull nutrients in through the root system because there was lack of moisture, you may show a deficiency in the tissue, which isn't actually deficient in the soil. You know, when the plant's very young, you may have a situation where you pull the entire plant to send in, but your lab will have that detailed on exactly what they want you to pull and how many. They'll even provide the bags and different things for you to package those materials and send them in.
Your preferred lab is going to have its own set of guidelines and protocols that you can use whenever pulling your samples. A couple general rules may be, don't take a tissue sample right after a foliar application. If this does happen, you can use distilled water to rinse the sample from any contaminants before you send that sample in. Do not use plastic bags whenever collecting your sample. It could cause deterioration of your sample. Another thing to consider is making sure you get your sample sent to your lab in a timely manner. You don't want to take the risk of crop degradation and your sample being skewed by that data. Once you receive your results back from your lab, make sure you work with your local agronomy expert on interpreting the results to get your maximum value out of the test.
Feel free to check out our website at agroliquid.com, hit the Ask an Agronomist tab, and one of our professional agronomists will be in contact with you to help with your questions.